Good morning, everyone. It is another lovely Sunday. How's the weather at your place? It is raining here in Tanah. So this week we are glad that Dr. Ghulam is joining us again, and this time he will join us for a series about the soil quality. I am Fong Yit Meng, representing Pasarkita. For those who are new to Pasarkita, Pasarkita is a platform that connects urban growers to buyers, where we help urban growers to start planting, growing, and we help them to market and distribute their products. So today with us is Dr. Ghulam, our long time supporter that always shares his experience with us. Dr. Ghulam is a former research officer at MARDI. He was also the former president of Malaysian Society of Soil Science. He is also an author of Managing Soil Erosion and Nutrient Depletion. And also he has another book called Kawalan, Hakisan, Tanah, dan Kesejahteraan Alam Sekitar. Welcome to the show, Dr. Ghulam.
Thank you, Mike. Shall I start now?
Yes, I guess everyone is excited to learn about the topic for today, the effects of soil structure towards plant growth. So, Dr. Ghulam, for the benefit of new viewers, please start with some introduction about yourself and then tell us what you want to share today. Pass to you, Doctor.
Okay, thank you. Assalamualaikum. Good morning. Mike has already introduced me actually. So I actually know a little bit about soils, and I have been working on soils, doing some research when I was at MARDI, and I have read quite widely about soils. And I have written 2 books as mentioned by Mike. If you find them, maybe you can have a look, and perhaps if you are interested, you can buy the books from MARDI. Actually, MARDI has a bookshop where you can contact them online and they will send it to you. Okay, I will share screen now. Mike.
Yes, please go ahead.
Today, as Mike has mentioned, I'm going to say a little bit about soil structure and how it affects plant growth. As we know, how do I do the slideshow? Okay. As I mentioned in my previous talk, we look at soils from different angles, especially from the angles of the major branches of science, that is biology, chemistry, and physics. And because all these aspects of soils are important and they influence how the soil develops, how you have to manage it, and how it affects plant growth. And more importantly, as I mentioned before, the most important part of the plant is actually below the ground. That is what you cannot see from the soil surface. And this is where all the action is. And so a lot of people, when they want to plant something in the soil, they will usually first think about soil fertility, how to make it fertile, give it more nutrients, what are the amounts and types of fertilizer, and when to apply fertilizer, and so forth. But also important is the organisms that are in the soil itself, microorganisms, macroorganisms, and others, and also the importance of organic matter, which I stressed in my previous talk. This is more and more people are recognizing this and are realizing the importance of the biological aspect of soils. But other than those, also important is the soil physical aspect. And from the soil physical aspect, I think we should try to know more about soil structure because it has been less discussed as far as I know. And I think I will try to introduce a few things about soil structure so that you can start to learn more about how to manage the soil physical properties of the soil. When I say soil structure, I actually mean, in simple terms, the arrangement or the assembly and arrangement of the soil particles. As you know, the basic soil particles are clay, silt, sand, and organic matter. Clay, silt, sand are mineral matter, and they are distinguished by their size. Clay is very, very, very small, very fine. It is less than 0.002 millimeters. And you can't really see it with your naked eye. But anyway, it is very fine, very small, and also the most reactive of the different soil particles. Whereas sand is very large compared to clay, and silt is in between. But in addition to these three, organic matter is also a very important component of soil because it plays a role in the chemistry, in the biology, and the physics of the soil. Normally, clay is the most reactive because the surface of the clay particles is actually charged, negatively charged. And when it's charged, it tends to be attracted to other charged particles, especially positively charged particles. So with this quality, the clay in the soil tends to form aggregates. That means they join with other particles, with other clay with clay, clay with sand, clay with silt, and so on to form an aggregate. Or in the literature is sometimes mentioned as the secondary particle. So clay, sand, silt are primary particles, whereas soil aggregate, as a result of joining together of different soil particles, are secondary particles. And in this talk, I will mention quite a few times about aggregates and the process of soil aggregation. And I will emphasize the fact that these aggregates by nature differ in terms of size and shape. Size can be, some can be small, some can be medium, some can be very large. And also, they are not all square or round, but all sorts of shapes. This, I think, is some unknown law of nature. When soil aggregates are formed, they seldom ever you become uniform. That means not of the same size or the same shape. They are all very different sizes and very different shapes. I think there is a wisdom in this, in the sense that this is the way for the soil to create pores within the soil. If all are of the same size and shape, then they will pack very tightly together and there will be very few pores. That means there is no space for air to move around, to enter the soil and move around. That is why when people who study science want to measure the parameters of soil, one of the important measurements is the porosity. How many percent porous? Is it 50% porous or 40% porous? And here is a picture of a soil clot. Here I use the term soil clot as a piece of soil that you can pick up from the soil and it sticks together, it doesn't crumble in your hand. And it is composed of many soil aggregates and sand particles and silt particles. So the higher the degree of aggregation, there'll be more aggregates. And these aggregates, as I mentioned earlier, are in different forms and different sizes. And because of these differences, you can see that there are many pores within the soil clot as well as on the surface of the soil clot. And this makes the soil very good in terms of structure and encourages the growth of roots. So as you can see in this soil plot, there are many roots, and inside also there will be many roots. Not only that, there will be also various soil microorganisms. And on the left, the diagram on the left will show you in a diagrammatic way that within the soil, which has a good structure, there will be many different aggregates of different sizes. And then the sand grain, in this case, the sand grain is quite large. And then the other three large ones, maybe one of them is aggregate, one is another sand grain, or maybe all three are aggregates. And beside them, then you can see the small figures. These are also the small aggregates. And what is important in this soil is that there are pores. That means in between those particles, whether aggregate or sand or whatever, there are space for free movement of air within the soil and also between the soil and the soil surface. So there's an exchange of air because everything that lives in the soil, the micro aggregates, the soil fauna, the earthworms, will require oxygen. And even the roots will require oxygen because the roots function to not only to take up the nutrients for the growth of the plant, but also oxygen. So with the presence of these pores, then it will be easier for the root to grow in them to become, to grow bigger and to spread out within the soil and also to perform their functions. That means to support the plant, the whole plant. And here is another diagram showing the same thing, but as I said before, there are large aggregates, there are smaller aggregates, there are medium-sized aggregates, all sorts of mixture, a mixture of so many sizes and so many shapes. There are no round ones here, but there could be some round ones also, I don't know. And so in between all these things are the pores where the air will flow and where the roots can expand and grow. But also I must mention here the role of organic matter is very important because organic matter itself is reactive, just like the clay particles. The clay particles attract the other particles and the sand grains and the silt grains, but the organic matter is actually the material that holds them together, that acts as a bridge to hold the aggregates together. The better the quality of organic matter, the more stable will the aggregates be. And here is an example of a soil with good structure that I dig out and put in a container. And you can see the aggregates are still there, big ones, small ones, and even the clots are still intact. So this to me Because it's dark in color, it must be rich in organic matter, and then it has a, a nice amount of clay, sand, and silt, and the conditions are such that with the presence of organic matter, they form all these stable aggregates. Another example, and here I want to show you that some of the pores are quite visible. Some are large pores, some are micro pores, which actually you can't see, but they are there. And see how the roots are doing very well. They're growing out of the soil, and I suppose within the soil cloth itself, there will be many roots. And when we talk about aggregates, we have to talk about how stable they are. Because if they're not stable, and then with a little bit of disturbance or with water, you pour water on it, and then it disperses into individual particles, into clay, silt, and sand, no more aggregates. Then that is not stable. And when that happens, the dispersed particles, the clay, silt, will fill up all the pores. And then the soil will lose the pores. And then it will affect the airflow and the water flow within the soil. And that will not be good for plant growth. So many studies have shown that you need organic matter in different forms to ensure that the aggregates are stable. So if you go into more detail, then you will realize that organic matter itself comes in different forms, and some of these help to stabilize the aggregates. As I mentioned, we don't want the pores to be filled up. We want them to remain in the soil as pores, because air, oxygen is very important for the roots and for the plant as a whole. In fact, we can do a quick test. When you are in the field, you see the aggregates, but you want to know how stable they are, you can do a quick test in the field. You must bring a bowl of water to the field. And here I want to show you the difference between a soil with stable aggregates and one which has hardly any aggregate. That is, all exists in individual particles on the right. But maybe there's some aggregates, but we can't really see them. But the one on the left, you can clearly see the aggregates. They're of various sizes. And then there are the bigger ones are the clots. The clots are made up of many different aggregates that are held together. But within the clot, there will be many pores, and also between the clots and so forth. So the clots you can think of as a super aggregate. And this is another example. Without digging the soil, you can see from the top that the soil is dark in color, an indication of high organic matter content. And then it doesn't seal the surface. It's quite porous. You can shift the soil around a bit, and even if you add water, the water won't stay on the surface. It will seep into the soil, because there are so many pore spaces for the water to move through. This is actually the same place, but taken a bit closer. And you may ask, how did the soil become like this? Where did the organic matter come from? Actually, soils should constantly be associated with organic matter, vegetative matter, that will slowly decompose. And when they decompose, they release the nutrients that they held in them to the soil for use by the plants that you will grow later. And also the vegetative matter will serve as food for the organisms. earthworms, whatever other soil fauna, soil flora that exist in the soil that help to develop the soil and make it, turn it into a site where the nutrients that are contained in it are released so that the roots can take it up, and then the water, the roots will grow and explore the whole area of the soil to take up all the nutrients that are available and to transport the nutrients, water, and oxygen to the plant leaves, the fruits, and the twigs, and so forth. And this is another way how to make the soil, to improve the soil structure. This is one way of always adding organic matter to the soil. Under a tree, usually you get all these brown leaves falling all the time after they have become brown. They fall to the ground, and in fact, as I said before, all these leaves, they hold a lot of nutrients, a lot of organic matter, and when they fall to the ground, it is nature's way of recycling, because the nutrients that are in the green leaves were initially taken up from the soil. And when it goes up through the stem to form the leaves, the fruits and the flowers and whatnot, and when the time comes, they fall to the ground. So the nutrients are released back to the soil. At the same time, they become the food of microorganisms, of earthworms, of millipedes, and other organisms that live in the soil, that help to develop the soil, that create soil aggregates, and that create the pores within the soil. Another important input that you can give to the soil is compost, because compost is very rich in organic matter, very rich in nutrients, and also is a favorite food of the microorganisms, of the earthworms, and so on. So other than the fallen leaves, then the compost, which you can make by using ordinary materials, takes time, and if you apply the right techniques, you can get good compost like this, and help to improve yourself. And when you improve your soil, your crops will grow better and will produce more. So if you let your soil structure deteriorate and you get poor soil structure, what happens is the soil will be compact, because the pores will be destroyed. And even if there are still pores there, they are not connected. That means isolated pores, which doesn't facilitate the flow of air and the flow of water. Also, it will make it difficult for the roots to proliferate. I mean, the roots need to grow, to search for nutrients, to search for water, and to support the plant or the tree. If there are so few pores, then it's difficult for roots to grow and expand. As I said before, the root system is one of the most important parts of a plant or a tree. That is where all the action is. And also, if the soil structure is poor, then water will not flow readily into the soil. It will not infiltrate. Therefore, the water will remain on the surface, and there will be more runoff. And with more runoff, you are likely to have more erosion. Also, obviously, biological activity will be less, because not enough air for the organisms to breathe. And to show you again the differences between a soil of good structure and a soil of poor structure. On the right, obviously, is a soil of poor structure, and on the left, a soil of good structure, where there are plenty of pores, and the pores are connected to each other, and then easy for water to flow into the soil and down the profile, and then easy for the roots to grow and expand. But on the other hand, on the right side, very poor rooting system, not much air within the soil. And when it rains heavily, the water remains on the soil. That is not good for plant growth, because the roots are severely affected, so the plant cannot grow well. For some crops, like oil palm, for example, stagnant water will slowly kill the oil palm. I don't know. They say the oil palm cannot stand stagnant water for a few days. So once there is waterlogging, you must drain out the water quickly, because the plant cannot breathe without air in the soil. Similarly here is like the previous one, but here they use the word crumb for the aggregate. To me, a crumb is an aggregate. I don't think there is any difference in the size and shape. All the soil needs to have are the soil aggregates that are stable and of different sizes and shapes. Once this is achieved, then you get a good structured soil, and the roots will be very happy about it. And here is the soil under that pile of leaf litter that I showed before, where there are so many layers of brown leaves that has fallen. And the leaves, if you look at the lowest layer, then you can see that they are in a very high stage of decomposition. And as they decompose, they release the nutrients. And some of the roots will grow just below this layer and just above the surface of the soil, because this is where they can catch the nutrients that are being released. And as you look at the pile of leaves, as you go higher, then it will less decompose. And at the top, it is not yet decomposed, although it has fallen down the tree. And then with all this decomposition over time, then there will be the organisms, the earthworms, the microorganisms, the fungi and bacteria and so forth will multiply and will be very active, and they will speed up the decomposition of the soils that are in the higher level, because they are already there. And when they come down, this becomes their food, and they multiply quickly and carry out the process of decomposition, so that the soil benefits from the release of nutrients, from the addition of organic matter, and from the formation of soil aggregates. And to show you the contrast between the previous one and this one, you can see that this one is very poor quality soil. Actually, it is very close to each other, just about 5 meters apart. And yet this one, because it has no continuous addition of organic matter, it has become very poor. You can't see any aggregates on the surface. Of course, there are no pores, and some erosion has actually occurred here. If you look at on the right corner, the bottom part of the right side, you can see the stones. There are several stones there, and these stones are sitting on the soil. Originally, they were part of the soil, they were in the soil, but because of erosion, then the soil has been washed away, but the stones remain behind. So this is an indication of soil erosion. And also the soil, although it's quite dark, it has some organic matter, but it has not been developed, it has not developed so well in terms of aggregation. And here is another example where the first thing you see is that the poor crop growth. And this is not surprising because if you look at the surface of the soil, it is very pale in color, indicating that the organic matter content is low, and then hardly any aggregates are seen. I assume that the porosity is very low, and because of this, root growth is restricted, and the plants cannot perform well. Even if you add fertilizer, it may not be very, it may not help the plants very much because the roots cannot grow properly. And similarly, during the rainy season, the soil of poor structure will have standing water on the surface. And this will again not be very good for root growth and for microbiological activity. And in some places, they want to grow their plants, their crop on good soil, but the original soil may not be of good quality. So they think that it is important to have good soil structure for the crops to grow well. And so they have resorted to mounding. That means putting good soil on the surface, like a bed. And so they are willing to do the mounding process. It may cost a lot, but maybe because their crop is of high value, they can afford to do this. And it's quite a big farm or orchard. And they also practice mulching with vegetative material. If you look properly, you can see that on the mounds, they have this straw or vegetative material to protect the soil surface, as well as to increase the organic matter content of the soil. And you can also see that they like to keep these grass strips. Of course, they maintain the grass well, because grass sometimes, most of the time, will contribute organic matter to the soil through the root decay. That means the roots, after a while, will decay, and then new roots will grow, and then the new roots, after a while, will decay, will decompose, and every time they decompose, they will add organic matter to the soil. And the presence of this grass, as well as the decomposition of the roots, will help to multiply the number of soil microorganisms. And this will be very good for improving the soil quality and hence improving also the crop performance. So when you want to look, decide whether a soil is good or not, just by looking at the surface, you have to look for this. Firstly, you try to see whether it is dark in color or not. Dark in color is positive. That means there's some amount of organic matter there. And then you look for the aggregates. You can see them nicely. They are present in various forms and shapes. And then this is another good sign. And then the soil itself is, sometimes you may even see earthworms and other organisms. This is another good sign. And also, when it rains heavily, most of the water will quickly seep into the soil, will infiltrate into the soil. It won't stay on the surface. This is another good sign. And of course, if you touch or you step on the soil, you don't feel the hardness. It's almost like a spring, you know. So that is a way to see whether soil is of good structure or not without having to dig it up. So I don't know how many minutes I've taken.
Yeah,
Have I
it's
taken too long?
11:35 now, doctor.
Okay. So I think I can end here and say that um, what is important about a good soil structure is that it provides the pores. The pores are very important in soil for the roots to grow well, to be able to perform their functions well. And you must try to get pores which are continuous. That means at least 50% porosity. And you must have micropores, that is large pores, and also micropores. Because micropores has also many other functions like holding water in it and for different forms of microorganisms. And again, I'd like to mention that the process of soil aggregation is very, very important to maintain good soil structure. And this normally is associated with regular additions of organic matter in the form of compost or other materials. So in a soil of good structure, you are not only assured of conditions which make roots grow well, but also you are assured of what air and water flow in a manner that is good for the roots and good for the soil. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, doctor, for your sharing. It is wonderful to learn so much about soil from you. Yes. So, doctor, from your talk just now, I realized that we can always look at the color of the soil. Is it an absolute term, which means that if it's darker or gray color, it is always a better soil?
Yeah, for me, if the darker it is, the more organic matter in it, and most likely the soil will be of a better quality than if you see a pale colored soil. But sometimes pale colored soil may be due to the color of the parent material. That means the rocks that form the soil. But if there is organic matter, then you should be able to see some dark elements. You know, always organic matter is always dark.
I see. Okay, doctor, I think we lost your video. Maybe you can start your video.
Oh, start my video.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Doctor, so for example, just now you mentioned about palm oil plantation. I noticed that a lot of these palm oil plantations, their soil are yellowish in color. Does it mean that it does not have any organic matter, or it is just because the soil is just yellow in color?
It depends on whether you are looking at the subsoil or the topsoil. Sometimes the topsoil is absent because of some issues, but then the subsoil, if it's yellow in color, that means it's low in organic matter, and it's not the soil structure is not that good, and maybe the oil palm does not suffer because the the area may be sloping. So during rainy periods, the water flows away. It doesn't flood the soil. But if the soil is flooded for I don't know how many days, but for several days, then it's certainly not good for the oil palm because the roots cannot breathe.
I
But
see.
if you go to a plantation where most of the plantations of oil palm in Malaysia, I think, they practice this, the fronds, when they cut the fronds, they don't throw it away. They pile them up on the soil. And this is a very good form of mulching because it protects the soil surface and it also constantly adds organic matter to the soil. And then I think the soil will benefit from it. There will be many microorganisms and the soil structure will be good. Unless, of course, they have allowed erosion to take place, so the topsoil is lost. But the pruned fronds themselves should help to reduce soil erosion. And of course, other than that, they are a good source of organic matter and a good um, way of attracting microorganisms to the soil.
So, doctor, you mentioned that we need to introduce more organic matter to the soil. So, for example, if the soil is in there are some unfertile soil, how can we reintroduce new components to the soil? I'll give you an example. There's a piece of soil, a land in KL area. So maybe due to construction or any reasons, they have a lot of the waste like rubbish or the tiles, etc. They dump into the soil. So is this going to deteriorate the quality of the soil itself?
I think that definitely the soil will not be good if you dump the plastic, the broken tiles, the bricks into the
Yeah,
soil, then it will not be good. You may be able to rehabilitate it over the long term. You have to slowly remove all this uh, synthetic material and slowly add all this vegetative material on it, and then maybe over time it will help. It can grow some crops. Of course, you add compost or fertilizer. All this will help in the long term, but maybe the cost may not be uh, attractive enough. I don't know. It depends on the situation, but
I see.
as the soil needs organic matter and it needs the vegetative material. So organic matter in the form of vegetative. Of course, also in the animal waste. Animal waste helps because in the animal waste, there are many microorganisms and all these very different species of microorganisms all do their work when they are in the soil. They have all their functions that they can perform, and they will perform better if there is plenty of food for them. And food can come in the form of dry leaves, in the form of compost and so on.
So what you recommend is we need to rehabilitate the soil by removing the foreign materials, the non-vegetative materials, and
Yes.
then to introduce some microorganism from for example, the animal waste. Then this will help the soil in the long run.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Even if in most of these cases, when they disturb the soil, they normally result in the topsoil loss. And so what you are left with is the subsoil. Subsoil originally have not that much organic matter. So you need to add organic matter gradually, and even try to plant something and give fertilizer to the plant so that the plant can grow uh, and survive. And that also with the roots of the plant exploring the soil and decaying and then produce new roots, all this will eventually help to rehabilitate the soil. It's not good to put all this organic matter and vegetative material, but you don't grow anything there. Also, will not be of much help. You need to grow something. Of course, in the beginning, the crop will not grow very well, but you can nurse it to health and give it enough water, give it enough nutrients. Then slowly you can, I think, make it better.
Okay, thank you for your tips, Doctor. So we are almost at the end of our discussion for today. Thank you very much, Dr. Ghulam, for your knowledge and sharing. So we look forward
Welcome.
to see you again in the next episode of our soil quality. There's a lot to learn from you, Doctor, about how to treat the soil and how to use soil, create a better environment for our growing. So thank you very much, Doctor, and stay safe and have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Bye, Doctor. Thank you.
Bye.